right, so welcome to episode 2 here. Of course, this is Brad Poirier. This is
Dino the Barber.
Dino the Barber, and this is going to be episode 2 of the DADS Unscripted podcast. And the topic for today, which is sent in from a viewer or audience member, I guess, is how to hold a conversation with your children. So this is interesting. So, Dino, what's your? I talked a lot in the last one, so let me get your thoughts initially on this.
Yeah, I think that's very important, man. Being able to hold that conversation with your kids, and one of the bigger things is always it's kind of uncomfortable, but in order to make progress, and a lot of times you got to have those uncomfortable conversations, and having those conversations, especially when it comes to mental health. That's very important to try to help your child understand as much as possible. I got a lot of understanding just lately. My child, all my kids are actually adults now. And I just received this long, passage from my daughter. And she said she actually just got up and, she was feeling kind of, sensitive about her day and age, where she is today. And basically relationships, and how she feel, the childhood and the things that she went through in childhood, how it's still affecting the relationships today.
Wow.
And it was an eye opener. And again, it was something that I was glad to hear from my child, and then to just now with her being grown, I know the conversation, it was totally different back then. But now with understanding a lot of trials and tribulations of the world today that we're living in, she has a better understanding, and she's been enlightened through these different situations to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting. And it must feel good, as a dad, that you're just kind of like, wow, she was comfortable with coming, Because, I think sometimes, some dads, when they found out later that their kid was suffering or they went to someone else, it's kind of like, man, it's like, what, why am I not approachable? I thought I was approachable, but obviously you developed a good relationship with them over the years that she felt comfortable, coming to you with this.
And that's one of the big things, man, with us, like I say, as and me for such a long time, I was a single father, and raising, 3 girls and 1 boy, that was tough, so just being able to, again, always wanted and felt like I was being that father that could be approachable. But in some cases, it's just not that. Now, like you say, 20 years later, you look back on conversations and hear, the things that the kids say. You're like, man, I was working so hard to, be that way, to be that father. And the whole time it was, it was received different, from the kid.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you went and talked about I'm gonna have to cut this. That you went with the difficult conversation part. When I heard this question asked on Instagram, so we're at Dads Unscripted, so you can ask questions there or anywhere on social. I actually just went and took it as sort of like how to have like a meaningful, like just any conversation, with your children. You know what it is? Your children are older.
Yeah.
And my kid's 7. And so the conversations that I'm having with him are about like, hey, how was your day in school? Like, what did you do today? So I'm thinking about like how to hold a conversation with a 7-year-old, as a 40-year-old dad, and so I'll talk about it that way for a moment. I haven't always been good with this, but I love talking to my kid about what's going on with his day or something. Mm-hmm. And the biggest, I guess, the biggest thing that I do is just listening and then asking follow-up questions. Yeah. It sounds very cliche to say that, but, like I'll say, man, hey, like, how's your day? What'd you do today? Oh, nothing. Like, it's like, obviously I know he did something. And then I'll just try and notice something that happened. I'll just say, oh, tell me about this. And then say, oh, yeah, actually we did this. And then I'll say, well, tell me more about this thing, or like, who did you meet, at the school today? Like, what was their, like, what was their name? Like, what did you know anything about them? Just asking all these like little follow-up questions. And then, man, he just
it's like you got to give them triggers. Like you say, if you just ask them out of the norm, how was your day? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to give us, it was a good day. Mm-hmm. Well, what was the interesting thing today? Not too much, and then like you say, if you already noticed something that was pretty interesting or something that could be a topic of conversation, you kind of nudge them with that. And like you said, they will open right up and, they'll keep right on going. One of the biggest things that I did learn early with conversating, like you say, with the 7-year-old and when my kids was younger, especially with my son, actually for all of them, for any child that matters. And this is for parents now today. One of the biggest things that I did learn was make sure that you're at your child's eye level when communicating with your child.
Yes.
You don't want to stand over because we're already, like you say, taller. So it's an intimidating factor right there. So just being able to, if it's kneel down or sit down, beside them where it's kind of, more eye to eye, they receive you better that way. And it takes that intimidation factor away from them.
Yes, definitely. That's a valid point. I do remember learning that early on, and I've tried to be cognizant of that. Here's a truth bomb I just thought of. And I don't know how true this is because I haven't really implemented it, but my gut tells me that it's true. And I'm going to try this with my kid this week, is like being open from the get and telling him about my day. Mm-hmm. It's not like my day is, I mean, I don't have to tell him about the bad stuff of the day, the struggles, but I could just talk to him about just the little, inconsequential things that happened.
Yeah, or highlights.
Just little highlights. Yeah, that's exactly it, and hopefully, I think the reason I just thought of that is because, again, as we talked about last week, how, the generations grown up about, men, we don't talk about things. And the reason we don't talk about things is because we're told to just suck it up. I mean, it's ingrained, right?
It is.
And so I think about that. I mean, because when I was answering that question, I was thinking about, I remember clearly my parents asking me, like, how was your day? And I'd be like, oh, it was fine. Like, I mean, I just answer those. That's just a normal reaction where you don't have that as like a prompt, when it's a prompt, but you don't have an answer ready. It goes like, it was okay, But I feel like I'm going to try that with my son this week.
And I think the kids, they look at that as, that response, that answer, it's a safe place.
That's right.
That's a safe place answer to give when they give you the, it was a good day. I had a good day. And again, number one, we know they don't want to disappoint us. So they're not going to start off telling you nothing bad.
Right. Right.
So they definitely don't want to disappoint us.
That's another point. That's another great point. Yeah. I think we need to just talking all about this. Again, this point of this whole podcast is to bring things to light and just get people educated better. I feel like just as a society of dads, we need to do a better job at basically training our children on how to take care of their mental health from a young age, like even as early as like how my kid is 7. Like we train them on things like the dangers of not running in the streets, like being aware of, stoves and just simple things like that.
Stranger danger.
But also, but then we also teach about the fun things, right? Like, how to ride bikes and, how to, play sports, all those kind of things. But I feel like we need to do like a passive job but an intentional passive job of teaching them how to be open and talk. And I think that's basically done just by doing it ourselves.
Yeah,
I guess that's my whole point to that, is I feel like I'm just gonna see how that, he'll be like test subject number 1 for me. It's like
and that's good because like you said, that's a great thing, and it starts, like everything, it starts at home. So if we start doing that at home, we don't really rely on teachers, when they get to school, to try to teach them, about how to deal with the mental health or how to, be more open. That's not the teacher. The teacher should be the one where actually they're doing the testing to see what they learn from home.
Right.
And when they see that they lack certain things, I feel that kind of puts a barrier up in some places with, some teachers or some educators. Mm-hmm. But I think, like you said, the more we practice these things and the more, dads across the, the board really focus on that, make that, like I say, make that part of, like you say, when teaching, like I say, basketball or football with practice, the same way you want them to practice to develop, to be better, they should do the same thing when it comes to this, over practicing how they should respond to certain things and, get a little deeper into the, the feeling. Why are you feeling this way? Mm-hmm. Well, tomorrow, what are you going to do if this situation happens again? Like I said, we need to know what they're thinking, man, because they will tell us. A lot of times they will tell us, like you say, you know, when you ask them something, they're going to give you something that's vague and safe. But when you dig a little deeper and tell them, okay, this is what I'm going to ask you tomorrow. So now their mind is more prepared throughout that day. And like you say, and realizing, okay, I know I'm going to get, asked a certain question. So they are more aware of their day and what's happening through that day to have that good point to talk about.
Yeah. And now as a seasoned dad, because I feel like even though my kid's 7, I feel like I'm still like a newer dad, Yeah. So as a seasoned dad, let me ask you this. So kid comes, whatever age is, but he gives you some like disappointing news. Maybe he did something like really bad or something happened, just something that's like, it's like uncomfortable to hear. And now you need to have kind of a critical conversation, but you want to be constructive about it, exactly. Right? So how do you approach that?
Well, what I was told years ago by my grandfather was never have the conversation when you're upset.
Ooh.
That was one of the big things that I carried along, and it was when my grandfather told me that, it was like, he was this big, tall guy, but, it happened off of a situation where my son had actually set something on fire, and my reaction, because I was so upset, it didn't come across the way it should have. And my grandfather, picked up on it, and he let me know, listen, don't you never have the conversation or intend to punish your child when you're upset.
Ooh.
And that right there, every time my kids did something, it made me think first, am I upset or am I just a little angry about it? And if I did feel myself of being upset, because again, some of the things would be so disappointing where it would upset you as a parent. And so it would just make me fall back, and let them know, okay, yeah, I know the situation, but we're going to talk about it later. So I wish that would have been, like I say, a little earlier.
Right.
But that happened, like I say, as they was, getting a little older. Actually, my son, he was probably about 8, 9 then at that time when that started happening. So
ooh, that is a truth bomb right there for sure. Yeah. Actually, I remember maybe like a few months ago, my kid came home and he was kind of excited and he did something and basically knocked over like this water bottle that had just filled up, so water went everywhere. And I don't know what came over me, but I was just like, I said, you know what? I don't think he did it to like be malicious. I think he just did it because he thought it'd be funny. Because that's what he said too. He says, "I'm sorry," I thought it'd be funny. And I really think he really just thought that'd be funny. Like he's learning what's funny and what's not funny. So I like in that moment, I just kind of stopped and I was like, you know what, man? So I just backed away for a second and I came back. I said, hey, let's clean this up together. And then moments later, we talked about, and I'm not always like that.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not a saint here, but I vividly remember that, and just it was so much smoother doing that because he realized, he was like, thought it was funny, just trying to learn like what's a funny prank to do something and what's
to
not
get a
funny
reaction.
Prank. To get a reaction is exactly.
Yeah, and again, like you said, we're not a saint, no, and that's what this is all about.
That's
Dad's
right.
Unscripted. We're not perfect.
That's right.
And we're not looking at, dads as if we're perfect. And like you said last week, we are, by far, we're not professionals. Again, we're going off of our life experiences and the things that we know worked. And I just want to be that one to be able to share those things that I know worked for me, because if anybody, that's listening, they know where I come from. I didn't come from the greatest background. And so just learning now and knowing now, we're educating my kids, especially with my grandkids. And I got 5 grandkids. And so it's super important to, educate their parents still now where they can receive these things. Because a lot of the things that I thought I was, getting to them then, it was going clean over their head.
Yeah.
So we talk about these things, now, and it's more on another level. And it helps, especially I know with my son, because my mom used to say this thing to me, like, you just wait until you get your own kids.
Yeah.
Wait until you have your own, when I would do something disappointing or do something to kind of upset her. So I make sure I tell him that.
Yeah.
Because he look at it like, man, Dad, he want to start explaining this. I say, it was you. I say, you're just getting it back now. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, and just circling back to the whole, imperfect thing. I can't stress that enough. Just about the imperfection, that it's okay when you sort of react basically in a negative way. Sometimes I think the idea is that just being self-aware that you're trying to be better at these behaviors and these traits basically already makes you a good dad, I guess. So
Yep.
if you need some validation hearing that, my therapist actually basically told me that a few weeks ago. We were, sort of talking about, how I'm feeling and whether or not like I'm a good this or good that. And she was just like, just being self-aware about the fact of whether you're a good person or not a good person basically makes you a good person.
That's it.
Because a psychopath has no thought or feeling about that.
No clue.
No clue. Just does what they believe is to be the right thing, and usually it's very hurtful, And so yeah, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, and you're kind of going, man, that's a great answer. I wish I was calmer with my children. I wish I was, in the position to talk to them after the, incident happened, but my gut is to, be reactive. Just being self-aware of that and just basically just trying to help skew it over a little bit. And just, all right, the next time, let me try and be calmer. The next time you're a little bit calmer. The next time you're a little bit calmer. And then that forms that habit, that forms. And now you basically become this calmer kind of dad that shows up for your children in a healthier way.
And another thing, like you were saying about having that conversation with your kids, and it just took me back to when it got to a point where I was looking to start being an educator. It took a lot of time away from my kids and the family because I had to do a lot of, studying, and it was a lot of tough and long nights and days of studying. And it was a long duration where I knew I was not going to be able to go to their football games. I wasn't going to be able to go to the basketball games. But having that conversation with them and helping them understand, listen, this is what Dad got going on. I'm working on something that's going to definitely be able to add, to our lifestyle and make our, life better quality. So I'm not going to be able to do these things, but give me this time to do these things and we'll be back on track.
That's right.
And having that conversation, I think it really paid off. And it didn't have my kids, as adults now, like upset and regretting and, felt like, you wasn't never there and this and that. And I find out a lot just hearing from a lot of kids that come into my barber chair, man. That's one of the biggest things that I could say, it is, like you say, a lot of, single mothers, and those kids often talk about the time they wish they had with the dad.
Yeah.
And they talk about that all the time. The time they wish they had. It's not the monetary things. It's not all the material things. They say when they get older, they realize none of those material things, I don't have them. No, I don't even remember. I remember you giving me money, but I would have rather had the time. And that was a big factor that I was kind of concerned with, being a single father and my kids having to grow up in the barbershop. I felt that was going to be a big hindrance in their future. And honestly, it wasn't, man, because of those conversations that I was having. They clearly understand, from where we were and the way we were living at the moment to where we are now. All of that was sacrifice, so we still can't, take that off the table as dads. No matter what, we still got to make these sacrifices. But along the way of making the sacrifice, you got to have those conversations with the kid to help them understand the sacrifice.
Man, I'm going to tell you a truth bomb about that whole experience you just told me. And Tony, can you throw me that pen real quick, Tony? So I just want to write down a topic over there for after, but that made me think about the whole idea of quality time versus quantity time. And, we've often heard about quality time, right? It's we want quality over the quantity. I actually think it's the opposite. I think the quantity of the time outweighs the quality of the time, right? Yeah. So you're a dad, and obviously your schedule can be limited. Maybe you're working 2 jobs, you're working a job and you're going to school or something like that, like, as you were saying. And so you try and find these moments, these pockets of time to be front and center with your children. And that's true. That's important. One of my favorite things to do with my kid is just take him to the store for an errand. He's just, because that's a 15-minute trip out there. That's a 10-minute walk through the store. That's a 15-minute ride back. that 1 hour of just the laughing, the joking, listening to songs. Man, we'll be in the car, and my kid loves listening to classic rock because that's just like what I listen to. And he always says a thing. He says, add that to my playlist. He's got his own little playlist of like music that he likes to listen to. And sometimes it'll just be on the radio. It won't even be a song that like I was playing. It's just a song. He goes, oh, can you add that song to my playlist? You know, like I love that, you know. Exactly. And that to me, that only comes from putting in the quantity.
The quantity.
You get the quality out of the quantity.
That's true.
That's a
That's
truth
good.
Bomb right there. You get the quality from the quantity.
That's
you know, that made me think about that from, you know, taking your kids to the barber shop. You know, he comes here sometimes and, you know, maybe I'm working or something like that and just, you know, he's doing something else and I kind of just interact with him sometimes. And, yeah, man, the quality comes from the quantity.
And that was, in some cases, even as an adult now, man, you know, it's still some things that, you know, kind of bother me, you know, as a, you know, father. And it always kind of go back to, you know, what it was. Although we can't change those things that's in the past. It's just now that I'm aware of those things and I just speak to other fathers and my kids to help, you know, better understand it. Because it was, like you said, you know, as a single father, you know, and like you said, just up and running a quick errand to the store, something of that nature. It was like I wasn't in that position to be able to just up and just take one to the store, you know.
Right.
And when you're taking 3 and 4 kids out with you at one time by yourself as a father,
that's complicated.
The anxiety and it's very complicated because again, you're trying to focus on, and all it takes is 1 or 2 of them to be fighting and acting. So the experience it was totally different.
Yeah.
You know, at the same time now, we understand, you know, how to go ahead and deal with that a little better. You know, so again, man, it got so many different layers to this right here, man, that we can go on and on. But that's
what I was thinking about, that quality versus
man.
quantity. You know, it's almost like thinking of like, I almost want to come up with like 5 ways to increase the quantity or something like that.
Yeah,
you know,
we can like I said, we can revisit that because that, like I say, that's a whole. It's a lot into that right there.
That's right. Hey, so this is a good second episode. 30 seconds. Here we'll do an actual 30 seconds here. Ready? We didn't do it last time because both of our 30 mostly mine was more than 30 seconds. So let's see here. 30. All right, 30 seconds. Your highlight recap.
My highlight recap would be make sure that you are communicating with your kid. Despite how you feel, despite how, you know, it feels uncomfortable to talk about certain things. But when you talk about the uncomfortable things, you can get truth and you can get rest and you can get, you know, appreciation of the relationship that you start to grow and build with your child just by being able to have that conversation. And the other tip that I was saying, stoop down eye level when conversating with your child. Again, take away the intimidation factor.
Oh, look at that. That was right on the money, man. That was good. All right, let me see if I can actually do it in 30 seconds or not. I'm gonna go slightly. I don't know what the word is. So I don't want to waste time. You know, we talk about to do to others the way we want to be treated. You know, it's a verse in the Bible. I would say, you know, do that with your kid. You know, like we don't want to be yelled at. You know, we don't want to be. And again, it's okay if that happens, but we don't want to we don't want to be yelled at. We want to be demeaned. Yeah. And so just think about that. You know, that little child is feeling the same thing. Ooh, that was 30 seconds on the dot and with like a little bit of thought process there. All right, well, we're going to wrap up episode 2. You should be hearing episode 3 basically come out on the same day, and then episodes will drop weeklies on Thursday. Again, if you're listening to this, follow us on our socials on everywhere you can find us is at DADS Unscripted, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter. And if you're watching this, please go subscribe to the audio version of this if you like audio podcasts. We're basically on all the podcast platforms. So thank you for being part of the dad community. And speaking of which, Tony here is about to be part of the dad community.
Get ready, Tony.
How many months? 3. Ooh, just a few more months. He's going to be part of the dad community.
Wow. And we definitely got something to talk about with Tony because it may be something that he experienced that a lot of men I know for a fact haven't heard or really talked about it, but it's something very important that I researched and found out about new dads.
Okay. All right. We'll add that to the list for sure. All right. Peace.
Deuces.